Welcome to the Lean Out Your Business podcast, a show dedicated to helping entrepreneurs accelerate business growth and simplify success. I'm your host, Krista Grasso, and I've been working with businesses for more than 2 decades to help them lean out and optimize what's working while eliminating anything that's not adding value. So if you are ready to get more time back in your day, more profit in your business, and to do business differently, growing and scaling on your terms, let's dive into today's episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Lean Out Your Business podcast and our first episode in the new year. So happy new year. And this episode, I'm really excited to be chatting with Cathlyn Melvin because we're going to be talking all about how to leverage a TEDx talk to help you scale your business. And when you look at your goals for this year, I bet you might be thinking about a TEDx talk, or it's somewhere on your backlog of ideas of things that you'd like to do in your business. So I had the pleasure of meeting Cathlyn at this amazing and swanky party in New York City that we were both at earlier this year. And when she was sharing with me what she was doing in her business, I knew I wanted to have her on because I get asked so often, should I do a TEDx talk? Does it make sense? How could I leverage it? And so she's going to tell us all of the things in today's episode. So Cathlyn, welcome. I'm so excited you're here.
Same. I am super excited that we're getting together after meeting each other and connecting, and I have so much to share with your audience.
I love it. All right. So let me tell you a little bit about her, and then we're going to get into all the good stuff. So drawing on over a decade of experience as an actor, a director, a writer, an editor, and an educator, Cathlyn helps mission-driven personal brands design and deliver their world-changing messages through TEDx coaching and done-for-you copywriting services. Through this work, she helps solopreneurs and small team leaders get their message that's on their heart out into the world and into the minds of the people who need to hear it. So, as I shared today, we're going to be diving into all things TEDx Talks and specifically how you can leverage them to help you scale your business. So, first thing I want to start with is, why do you think a TEDx talk is a smart strategy for an entrepreneur, especially now that they've been around for a while? Like, are they still a really smart strategy, and why?
So I feel like this is such a big question. We could have a whole episode just on the why. So first of all, I think that it's a really great question to say, like, it doesn't still have the power that it used to. The internet has changed. We've gotten sort of used to seeing TEDx talks. And I think that what's happened is that over time, as we've seen more and more TEDx talks come out and we've seen the impact that they can make, they actually end up having even more power than they did back when they started. In the first TEDx event was in 2009. And so absolutely, they're still powerful. Absolutely, if it's on your dream list, keep it there, or maybe bring it off your dream list and into your real life this year. But as far as what the TEDx talk can do for you, there's just so much. And the first thing that I really want to touch on is that when people think about giving their TEDx talks, I think that a lot of the time in their mind, they have to wait until they've given the talk. They have to wait until the talk has come out online and they can share it with their community before they ever start really reaping the benefits of TEDx. And fortunately, that's not true at all. As soon as you decide, as soon as you commit to giving your TEDx talk, you can start talking about that, and it immediately gives you that weight, gives you that credibility of the TEDx brand and the TEDx logo, even before you've ever set foot on stage, even before you've applied. Because if you decide that I'm your person and you want to work with me as your TEDx coach, and you commit to that, and then you go on Facebook or on LinkedIn or wherever you hang out on social media and you say, I just signed with my TEDx coach, Cathlyn, and I'm so excited to get on the TEDx stage this year. Give me your best vibes. you are going to get so many likes. You are going to get so many people saying, oh my goodness, you're doing what I want to do. How are you doing it? All of this engagement. So right away, not only are you bringing the idea of TEDx and you closer together, and that in itself lends you credibility, but you're also helping the algorithm understand that you're a person that people want to hear from, you're a person that people want to celebrate. And as you continue to talk about it throughout your process on social media, or when you're in a networking one-on-one and someone says, so what's on your plate right now? And you say, I'm working on getting my idea ready for my TEDx applications. Just the idea of TEDx associated with your name or your face subconsciously makes us start to go, oh, this is a person to listen to. This is a person who knows what they're talking about. I should pay attention because they're an expert. And so you can really start from the very, very beginning, gaining that credibility and gaining that power. And it just dominoes. It just is like a snowball rolling down a hill as you go through that process, so that by the time your talk comes out, everyone around you wants to listen to it. Everyone around you wants to share it. And that then continues to ripple and ripple and ripple out that impact of your talk and the boost that it can give to your brand.
Okay, so I know we're talking about TEDx here, but I need to sidebar us for a moment to say, listen to the brilliance of what she just shared, because while this is a brilliant strategy for a TEDx talk, this is something you could do for so many things in your business. And what I see so many people do is they spend all this time behind the scenes working super hard on something, and then they plop it out into the world and wonder why they don't get a lot of reach from it, or why they don't get a lot of results or a lot of interest in it, whether it's the launch of a program, or whether it's the release of a book, or whether it's simply a new podcast. Anything that you're doing, leveraging this opportunity to be highlighting it, sharing your excitement, bringing people along on the journey, starting to associate your name or your brand or yourself with that thing, and building that momentum over time. That is how you have success. So I just think there was so much brilliance in what you said there. I want to kind of highlight that for everybody to be thinking more broadly of the TEDx talk, but also if you have in the past said, well, I've tried a launch and I've tried a book and I've tried this and I haven't gotten great results. Did you do what Cathlyn just shared? Because if you didn't, and you're using that as a reason to not proceed with a TEDx talk, thinking it's going to be a whole lot of work and I don't know that I'm really going to get a whole lot out of it, if you follow that strategy that she just shared, what an amazing opportunity for you and your brand to help you scale.
Absolutely. And, thinking about this idea of like, well, I don't know what I'm going to get out of it. As I take my clients through the process from idea generation to customizing applications to drafting the talk to getting it up on its feet, there is so much idea generation that happens throughout that process that by the end, you don't just have a TEDx talk and a super cool video of you that's living on the internet forever telling the world that you're an expert, but you have created so much sort of like fringe benefit content that sometimes you might have enough to fill your content calendar. You might have enough to do a series of podcasts. You might have enough ideas that you've already created that you can go and write your book if that's something that you want to do. And so that's something that a lot of people get out of doing their TEDx talk too, is just that idea generation when your brain is paired with another person's, trying to go through that process of this is the idea that I want to share, and there's so much. But in a TEDx talk, you only have max 18 minutes, and the average TEDx talk is about 12 minutes. So it's really about taking that idea and distilling it down and distilling it down and refining it to get all of the information that's essential in as little time as possible. So you end up with minutes and minutes and minutes of other content at the end too.
Yeah. And I feel like this is an exercise in leaning out your message as well. Like, how do you break it down to the core essential of what's going to communicate what you want, have the transformation or the effect that you want in all of 12 minutes? This podcast episode is 3 times longer than that. Like, 12 minutes is hard to do. So think about just in general how much expertise you gain from that too, which is something I think we could probably all benefit from. At least I will raise my hand there.
Oh, I think that's universal. I think there's not a single business owner who could go through this process and at the end be like, huh, my perspective hasn't changed at all, or my focus hasn't changed at all, or I'm exactly the same person that I was when I started. So I think that's all of us.
All right, so let's get into some of like the detail on this here. So for somebody who maybe this is still on their bucket list, it's not actually one of their active goals because they look at it and they're like, this is a huge undertaking. This is going to take me forever. I'd love to do it someday, but I don't feel like I have the space for it right now, or it's not worth my investment right now of time because I'm not going to get it done soon enough. What is actually reasonable? Because I suspect, like most things, when we don't know what we don't know, things are actually a little bit simpler and a little quicker than than we think they are when we look at them. So what is a reasonable expectation for somebody who decides that they want to do this year?
I would give yourself 6 to 8 months of lead time. And the reason that I would give yourself that much time isn't even for necessarily active work on the project, but because TEDx is what the X means in TEDx is that it's an independently organized event. So every TEDx event is organized by someone local to the community, and they're all different. They all have different approaches and processes and timelines. So some TEDx events, they may list their application information, 9 months ahead, some 6 months, some 4 months. And you just kind of have to keep checking back to see for those events that you're really interested in when their event in that particular year is going to be, and whether or not they've given that application information out publicly yet. So that's the general, like, 6 to 8 months. If you are on a more truncated schedule, if you are working with someone like me, or if you are in a group, if you've got that leadership of someone who has already gone through the process, that can truncate your process too. So my one-on-one program is 4 months, and that takes you all the way from the very, very beginning of figuring out what your idea is, all the way to having your final talk ready. That doesn't necessarily mean that in 4 months you're going to get on the stage, but by the end of that time, your talk is ready. If someone said, hey, I have a TEDx event coming up next weekend, would you come talk? You're going to be ready for that.
Awesome. Okay, yeah. That's really not so bad at all. That's what, 4 months. So by middle
Yeah.
of the year, you could be ready to go with TEDx, which just sounds very fast, all considering, which is great.
It does keep moving. So in that one-on-one program, we meet once a week, and it's every week there's something that you're working on, there's something that you're bringing back to me. In my group program that I'm currently launching, it's a 6 month program. So because you don't have that one-on-one attention in the same way, I give you more space to bring that all together. But even so, you can make incredible process with for my group students. I'm looking at 2 hours a week. One of those is coming to a call with me, which might be hot seats, which might be a Q&A, which might be a specialty workshop, and then an hour on your own every week that might be coming up with answers to application questions, or working on your talk script, or working on memorization. So it doesn't even have to be, I think some people think about TEDx as something that like takes over your life. And like so many things, the longer runway you give yourself, the less of that like really chunky time that you need every day or every week.
Yeah, such a good point. And so let's dive into what somebody would do to get started. So if somebody's like, all right, I'm going to move this thing up on my priority list, or maybe it's already pretty high on their priority list, what are some of the very first things they want to be thinking about?
The very, very first thing that I want you to think about is why you want to give a TEDx talk. What are your goals? What are you hopeful to have as a result of your TEDx talk? For some people, that might be to have a really professional, fantastic video that they can use to help them get other speaking gigs. For other people, it might be that they have a book and they're wanting to use the talk as a way to get those ideas out so that people buy the full book. Other people use TEDx to get the credibility to put into their book proposal so they can write their book. So there are a lot of different ways that you can look at TEDx. So figuring out what those goals are specifically that are personal to you, I think is an essential first step, because that's going to inform what sorts of events you want to apply for. It's going to inform the message that you bring. It's going to inform the way you approach the whole process. So that's step one. And then there are two other things that I like people to look at before they sort of like dig into the full process. And that's a skills audit. And I have a workbook that I can share with you too that takes you through these first three steps: the goals, the skills audit, which looks at a bunch of different skills that are really required to be successful as a TEDx speaker, regardless of what those goals are. And looking at the on a Likert scale, a scale of 0 to 5, 0 being this terrifies me, I'm not confident in this at all, to a 5 being like, psh, I could do that in my sleep, super confident, so that you know how to look for help, whether that's from a professional TEDx coach like me, or whether that's from an accountability buddy, or whether that's from your friends and family. Where do you need the most support, and in what different ways? And then the third part is figuring out what your big idea is. And when I say big idea, I mean big. I mean like general sort of, this is kind of what I maybe want to talk about. The kind of idea that if someone asks you, well, what do you want to talk about in your TEDx talk? It might take you 2 minutes to get it all out. Like, it's messy at this point, and that's okay. Because then when you start the in-depth process, my programs start with, whether you work with me in a one-on-one program or whether you work with me in the group program, everyone gets a one-on-one session right off the bat to take that big idea and refine it down into your really concise, very compelling idea worth spreading. That's going to be the foundation of everything that you do moving forward on your TEDx journey.
Brilliant. I love it. So let's fast forward a little bit in the process. And let's say somebody does that. They've got a brilliant, nice, concise, compelling idea. They've landed a talk. Is there anything that they should not do? Because I bet people make a lot of mistakes.
I think that the biggest mistake that people tend to make in this process, it's not even necessarily I might not even call it a mistake, but it's just a lack of experience and knowledge. Because as adults, we don't often have to do this kind of writing. We don't have to do this kind of editing. We don't have to do this kind of memorization. Certainly, most of us haven't had to memorize something that's 10, 12, 15 minutes long since we were, 16 in communications class. And so just not giving yourself enough time and enough space. And part of that is just because how our brains work. Creative work takes downtime. So as you are writing, you may be a person that can just say, today I'm sitting down for 6 hours, and at the end of it, I'm going to have my TEDx talk written. Some people, their brains work like that. For most of us, we need to go wash the dishes. We need to take a shower. We need to take a walk. We need to play with our kids. And that's when ideas sort of drip into us one by one. And so all of that is interspersed with an hour of writing here, 15 minutes of writing there, and giving yourself that time in that part of the process, and then in the memorization part. Again, like, you can't sit down and memorize your whole 12-minute talk in one setting. I encourage my clients, when they get to the point where their talk feels like it's finalized, and I say feels like because as you start memorizing and getting it up on its feet, you're going to keep making some minor changes. But once it feels like it's ready and you start to memorize, I say, okay, every day at this point, and this is where the time can build up a little more. Every day, 3 times a day, take 15 minutes to memorize in those little itty bitty sections, because then your brain can absorb it. It can live with that. You can come back to it and review it. And little by little, you can build up in a way that if you sit down and you try to memorize, 3 paragraphs at once, you're going to come back to it the next day and be like, this was memorized. I knew it. I said it. But it's just fallen out of your brain, because that's how our brains work.
That is true. As you mentioned that, I was like, when was the last time I had to actually memorize something long?
Right?
It had to have been high school. I can't think of a time past then that I had to have. So that's a whole lot of years ago.
Yep, we're out of practice.
Interesting. Fascinating. The whole process is fascinating to me. This is also in my business bucket list. However, it is not in my 2023 business bucket list. It's in my 2024 business bucket list. So for
Okay.
all of you who do this year, I want to hear how it goes, and that will help me for next year. So tell us a little bit more about you and your work and why this is something that you are so passionate about.
I have I've sort of leapt a lot of lily pads to get to where I am. And the first one really was when I was in high school. You wouldn't have found me on, the softball field or on a volleyball court. My sport of choice was competitive speaking and debate. And so I competed all the way up to the national level in a bunch of different categories. And the category that I most fell in love with was called oratory. And oratory was a 10-minute speech competition where you presented an idea that was supposed to change people's perspectives and persuade them to your perspective. And so fast forward, I, graduated from high school. I coached a speech team. I got my degree in theater performance. I studied classical theater, and I was working in Chicago as an actor when TEDx Talk started coming out online. And as I sort of started noticing these talks here and there, I thought, this is so familiar. This feels so much like the work that I did as a speaker in high school that I loved. And so at that point, I said, someday I'm going to give one of these talks. Someday I'll get on one of those stages. But I set it aside, and I set it aside, and I set it aside. It wasn't something that I ever focused on. And then like 10 years later, I had made some shifts in my life. I had left the theater industry to go to law school, found out that law school was not the right place for me. A lot in my life had changed in between when I decided to go to law school, and then like 2 years later when I had gone through the whole testing and application process and started my classes. And I had moved across the country. I moved from Chicago to Florida to go to school at this really great law school. I got a full ride scholarship. I was doing the thing. My whole community was super supportive of me. And so when I felt like this is awful in all of the ways that it could possibly be awful, and it's not for me, I really struggled for a long time with, do I quit? Do I become a quitter? Do I become a dropout? And in my mind, let everyone else down. which it was not rational, was not actually what was going to happen. But because I had that struggle, when I did finally decide to drop out, I thought this is what people need to hear. They need to hear that it's that even though we've been trained that the most important thing when you start something is to finish that thing, that can sometimes be harmful. And so that's what inspired my TEDx talk that I gave. And in the meantime, I've been working as a copywriter. That's still a service that I offer to my clients. And so I had this business community around me. And as I was getting my community engaged and ready to share my talk when it came out online, people started sort of like looking at me squinty and saying, "You've been an actor, you've been a director, you're a professional writer, an editor, you've been a speaker, you have this Venn diagram of skills. I want to give a TEDx talk. Will you coach me?" And so it was really sort of organically that I started offering this service. And I'm so glad. I'm so glad that I got those nudges from the people around me, because I love doing the work. It's such a good fit. One of my clients just gave her TEDx talk a couple of months ago, and afterwards she sent me an email that said a lot of things. One of them was that at the event, 3 different people came up to her to ask her to speak at their events, which is obviously like a big win, especially because one of her goals was to get more speaking gigs. So right off the bat, she's already winning there. But what really touched me about what she said was that the process was so much more than the TEDx talk, so much more than getting that video and having that specific experience, but that it gave her fortitude and it gave her dignity, and that it was really rewarding to set a goal that felt like big and go through a challenging process and come out the other side and say, "Hey, I did that. I did that, and already look what's happening."
That's pretty incredible. And what a great feeling. And I know because I help people with strategic planning, and sometimes people just they don't even realize what they're capable of in such a short period of time. But how great to have had her be able to get up on the stage and then have those instant results of other things that she wanted as well, beyond just the TEDx experience. I feel like that's like the best kind of achievement of a goal, is when it creates the ripple effect for a whole lot of other things that you also want to do.
And that's the power of TEDx. Like it's all about the ripple effect, not only for your business, but for that idea worth spreading, that you are presenting to an audience in a closed live room and then to the broader internet, and it gets shared and shared. And it's amazing to see, like on my TEDx talk, I have comments from people that I'm like, you are in no way connected to me. Like I can't even count. It's not even 6 degrees of separation. Like, who are you? How did you find me? And that's really fun too.
That's amazing. So tell people where they can find you and what you have coming up.
So the first place that I want to direct you is to the guide that I had mentioned earlier, that is the essential first steps to your TEDx talk. And you can find that if you go to www.writecatcreative.com. It's RIGHT, catcreative.com/links. That's a page where you'll find a few different freebies that you can access, but I especially want you to look at that one for your first steps so that you can get started. And then what is happening at the end of this month that I want to invite you all to is a Q&A that I call TEDx Demystified, because so many business owners do have TEDx on their someday list, their bucket list. And a lot of the time that's because their questions are unanswered. It feels overwhelming. The goal seems out of reach. Information is hard to find online, unfortunately. And so when I started doing this work, one of the things that I really wanted to do was help demystify that process. So on January 31st at 1 p.m. Eastern, I'm going to be giving a Q&A where I will answer some frequently asked questions. You'll have a chance to ask your own questions live as well, or submit them ahead of time. And you can register for that at writecatcreative.com/TEDxQA.
Brilliant. I love it. So yeah, if you're thinking at all about a TEDx talk, what a great opportunity to be able to get your questions answered. So we are just at the end of the interview, and I want to round things out with the same question I ask everybody, and I can't wait to hear what you have to share, which is, in your business, how do you work smarter, not harder, and keep things lean?
The way that I really try to simplify my business, I think it works for business, it works for life in general, is asking, does this align? And what I mean by that is, if you've done work about what your values are, if you've prioritized those values, you know how you want to show up in the world and the world that you want to create. That's foundational. Do that work. But then that gives you the freedom to say, when a client asks you for a project, or when a friend asks you to go on a trip, like, for whatever situation you're in, asking, does this align with my values? Does this align with how I want to show up in the world and the world that I want to create? I find it very freeing to have that framework and be able to sort of pre-qualify different activities to say, no, right now I'm really looking for calm. I'm always really looking for calm. That's one of my primary values, is cultivating calm. And that's maybe more chaotic than I want in my life right now, or that's adding more stress than I want right now. And so that's my secret tool, is, does it align?
Brilliant. I absolutely love it. And I do think that's so important to be asking ourselves all the time in our business, right? Are we focused on the right things? Not just the things we feel like we should do or we must do, but the things that we actually want to do, the things that align with where we want to take our business next or take ourselves next. So I think that's a really beautiful share. And thank you so much for sharing all of your brilliance with us in this episode on TEDx Talks, and how we could leverage those to scale our business, increase our credibility, and really just do some super smart marketing in our business. So brilliant. Love it. You will find all the links that Cathlyn mentioned down below in the show notes. So thank you so much again for being here, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, and I will see you again next week. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Lean Out Your Business podcast. I hope you got a lot of value and actionable insights from today's show, and would love if you take a moment to leave us a review. If you have any questions on today's episode or on how to lean out your business, join us over in our private Facebook community, where every week we do live training and Q&A, and I'd love to have you be part of the conversation. Head to leanoutmethod.com/group to join us. And before you go, be sure to subscribe to the show so you're the first to know when we release a new episode. We'll see you next week.